Don't want to record this yet.
Yeah.
Can you guys on Zoom hear me now?
And or see me.
Yes,
Okay. Can you guys see the screen?
yes.
Okay, perfect. Just double checking. Everybody here had a chance to grab an amazing free snack and use the bathroom? Okay. So we'll go ahead and get started because we have a lot of stuff we're going to cover today. We have Lily Gallagher
Yes.
from the Soil and Water Conservation District, the Androscoggin Soil and Water Conservation District, because our focus area is the Androscoggin Lake region. Somebody- Okay. Anyway, Lily is going to talk about the Soil and Water Conservation District's cost share opportunities and other educational opportunities that they have for landowners in the area so that we have a better understanding of the things that we can do for ourselves and the environment. And then we also have Nicole Rogers from the Maine Forest Service, who is the landowner outreach forester for the Maine Forest Service, who's going to talk about the Maine Forest Service Woodwise cost share program today. So I'm going to go ahead and let Lily start, and we'll go ahead and get going.
Well, hello, everybody here in the room, and hello to everybody on Zoom. I'm going to try to actually give my attention to both people because sometimes hybrid events, everyone ignores the Zoom, and I'm so sorry, guys.
Chat for you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so my name's Lily Gallagher. I am the new education coordinator and site technician for the Androscoggin Valley Soil and Water Conservation District. So I'm here to talk about our conservation landscape certification program, which is a not super new program for Maine conservation districts, but it is a program that we really want to start pushing and doing a little bit more outreach for because it's really important for bioconnectivity and it's really important for protecting soil and water. So let's see if I can figure out how to do the slides.
In the bottom left corner, there will be like little arrows.
Oh, I see. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, they made it unnecessary.
Yeah. Okay. So a little bit about us. So we are the Androscoggin Valley Soil and Water District, which means that we serve Androscoggin and Saginaw County. So that includes Leeds. And our mission is to promote the conservation and stewardship of soil, water, woodlands, and wildlife. And we provide outreach and education and technical services to help communities in these counties mitigate and adapt to a changing climate. Let's see. So what is our conservation or landscape certification program? It's a free checklist, and I have some copies that are at the table over there, but I've got one here as well for a little demonstration. And it's a free checklist that's available to anyone who has an interest in improving lands for wildlife habitat, soil and water conservation, and overall ecosystem support. And so it's pretty tailored for landowners so that you should be able to easily go through, walk on your property, and check boxes in areas where you seem to be doing things that are good for natural ecosystems on your landscape. And so this program was designed in Maine. It was designed by the Waldo and Knox-Lincoln Soil and Water Conservation Districts, which are pretty close to our service area as well. And they aim to combat habitat fragmentation, climate change, species extinction, invasive species, erosion, and more. And it also helps landowners implement conservation practices in an easy to follow systematic way. And it also kind of gives you the opportunity to learn more about the Maine landscape with resources. So we've got a resource guide that has a lot of book recommendations and very specific things about all of our core criteria that can help you to kind of learn about your property and learn its context in Maine. So, why would you want to certify your property is my next point. So going through this program and certifying your land as a conservation landscape, you'll gain a new found knowledge and appreciation for native landscapes that benefit all of the creatures that live there. It's a chance to watch birds, pollinators, and wildlife inhabit your land, feeding and raising young, and see beautiful changes in the landscape. It's also a really great way to get to know us and the types of programs that we do at our conservation district, because we'll provide one-on-one guidance for you in this program with your first hour free. And you can also get a sign indicating that your property is certified, and that can kind of spark some discussion with your land, like your neighbors and other people in your area, so that they can conserve their land as well and kind of create those wildlife corridors that are lacking when we aren't protecting the landscape in a way that is native to Maine. And I also just think that our posters look really nice for the people on Zoom. So.
Is it laminated or?
Yeah, it's kind of like a thick poster kind of, yeah, like they're pretty hardy, and weatherproof. We have tested them, so. And so here are some of the reasons why we think it's important. For soil building and erosion control, it's important for water management, retention, stormwater runoff filtering. It's good for improving the quality of landscapes, including cover crops, connectivity, and the reliance that wildlife might have on your landscape. It's good for wildlife habitat for all animals, which includes insects and other invertebrates, which are often forgotten about when we're thinking of conservation. And it's also great for invasive species control, which is a pretty pervasive problem in the state. And it's also really great for reducing chemical inputs, which impact everything up the list. And it's all at a local level through us and through other organizations. So what would a certified landscape look like? So this is the part where we kind of are starting to think about our checklist that if you decided that you wanted to certify your landscape, this is kind of the step-by-step process you would take. So first we'll think about wildlife habitat. And so that means food, water, shelter, and a place to rear young. So we've got checks here about what are the different types of food sources that you'd have on your property. And that can mean things like seeds, edible berries, foliage, nuts, and other fruits that might be produced by the tree and shrub species that you have on your property. We're also thinking about supplement feeders, because while we do want you to be planting natives and things like that, you can also kind of encourage wildlife to come to your property through bird feeders, hummingbird feeders, butterfly feeders, and other types of food and things like that for wildlife. And we're also thinking about having species that are offering pollen, nectar, and fruit during all of the growing season. So you want to be checking on your property. What have you got that's growing in the summer months and early fall and late spring? Because it's important to have that kind of connectivity happening all season long rather than just in June and July and August. You also will need to think about what types of water sources that you have for this wildlife. If you've got bird baths, if you've got fountains, if you have natural water sources that are on your property in general. And shelter for wildlife. So we're thinking about wooded areas, we're thinking about snags and not removing them because they're really great habitat. We're thinking about brush or log piles. We're thinking of leaving leaves on the ground in the fall. and a place for wildlife to engage in courtship. So we're thinking of mature trees, nesting boxes, wetlands, or host plants if you're thinking about insects. So that's our wildlife core criteria. And then, yeah, this is kind of what I was getting to, where we're trying to create these resilient habitats that don't necessarily rely on those things like bird baths or bird feeders and things like that. We want the plants as well to be contributing to wildlife being invited on your property. We also want to be thinking about different layers of plant diversity. So we want to have really dense and lush overstories, but we also want to be thinking about what's going on in the understory. So we want short to the ground. We want ground covers. We also want shrubby plants and shrubbery things that are going to be producing a lot of fruit and nuts and other things like that for wildlife. And then we also want to have those tall, more established trees that are going to be providing habitat for other wildlife. We also want to be thinking about reducing chemical use on our property. One of the ways that you can do that is by going for more native ground covers that don't necessarily need things like herbicides or pesticides. It can be a little bit tricky to navigate this particular step because the use of those chemicals is so pervasive, and it also does mitigate some unwanted pests like ticks and things like that. So this is kind of like within reason, use your own judgment, but we really do want to urge people to try to go for like more natural ways of mitigating those populations. So encouraging maybe have like raising chickens and things like that to eat ticks, or encouraging habitat that starts to lessen those populations or doesn't provide as great habitat for maybe unwanted insects and pests. We also want to be thinking about leaving seed pods, leaves, and other plant material where it is. This can be really critical habitat for a lot of species that maybe feel a little bit disconnected because of our kind of want/need to have these lush green lawns that have nothing else on them. If we leave these seed pods, leave the leaves and things like that, that provides really great habitat for amphibians. It leaves really great habitat for some small mammals. And it can really benefit those wildlife corridors that we're losing because people are raking leaves or raking up seeds because they don't want necessarily to grow more of those things. Another thing that's really important is to start capturing rainwater and preventing it from eroding soils. And so that can this kind of has like a two-factor sort of impact. So when you capture roof runoff in this way, first you can use that water. It's not just going to be left out of the system. And so it can really reduce water use, which is really great. And then it also does prevent that stormwater runoff that we see really often from gutters and from drip lines on the tops of roofs. And so this is a really great way to incorporate the soil protection component while also mitigating what else we're using in these gardens. And we also want to support healthy soil and mulch and compost. And so this is also kind of a really good component for erosion control as well when you're mulching things. And then compost is really great for your soil health. And so that's something that we're definitely looking for in this checklist because soil is kind of like the pillar of most of the recommendations that we're giving when we tell you to plant native species or to support this wildlife habitat. If you don't have the soil that can sustain that, then it's a lot harder for you to implement the other key practices and core criteria that we think are really important for good ecosystems. And so composting when you can and mulching is a really great way to protect your soil health so that you can implement the other recommendations that we might give. And we also want to be thinking about planting for climate resilience. And so one component of that would be looking into native plants that maybe are drought tolerant or plants that are flood tolerant, depending on what type of site conditions you have. It also maybe could mean planting things that are in assisted migration pushes and things like that. So thinking of things that maybe aren't true native to Maine, but are seen growing and thriving in these ecosystems that maybe will make a more climate resilient landscape later down the line as climate change happens. And so this is something that we really stress in this checklist, that you look at what other things you have planted on your landscape and try to find species that work well with those, or even plant some of the same things that you're already seeing and having that kind of variety come through. And so here's an example of what we would consider to be a really well done landscape that still has a lot of visual interest, where you've got these beautiful flowers that are attracting pollinators. You've got different levels of like height and ground cover and things like that. You're not seeing a lot of exposed soil or a lot of exposed lawn. In the back there, I'm assuming behind this fence is a more like established path. So you're keeping people to the same walking path everywhere, which also prevents erosion. And we would just consider something like this to be what we're kind of looking for in this landscape certification. And so one of our next steps, so here are the core criteria that we've been talking about this whole time, and then these are what are in the checklist. So we've talked a lot about wildlife habitat. We've talked a lot about soil and water conservation in the rain barrels and protecting the soils and bolstering them and building them. We haven't really talked about invasive species removal that much, so I'm going to kind of go into that now. It's a pretty big problem for a lot of Maine landscapes these days because of the way that we're so mobile and from where we are sourcing our plants from. And so it is a part of our checklist that removing invasive species is often recommended. And so some of the ways that we like to do that, we usually urge people to avoid using herbicides or pesticides when removing them, because that can also it can also impact the native species that we do want to be on your property. And so going for hand removal, and also properly disposing of invasives if you have a large patch that you need to remove that will spread without needing a ton of soil contact is also really important. And it is a pretty key issue for us when we're also looking at these landscapes. Sometimes it's hard to certify a property if it has a pervasive invasive problem. And so that's definitely something that we want to draw special attention to. Going down the list, we also want to plant for ecosystem support, which is kind of thinking of the climate resiliency, thinking about your site conditions specifically, and thinking about assisted migration. Implementing organic and IPM practices. So that also kind of goes into avoiding that use of herbicides and pesticides. And the optional conservation practices are its own little criteria here, criteria 6. And so that is like planning for reduced energy use, using dark plant lighting to reduce light pollution for night flying insects and other like birds and things like that. Reducing exterior noise and creating quiet soundscapes, and keeping keeping dogs leashed and cats indoors are some of those optional conservation practices. And then criteria 7 would be to steward and create woodland areas. And so this is the small residential use property checklist. And so that's kind of the copy that I brought today, because I'm assuming that's probably most of this audience. But we also have a larger checklist that's for forested lands that also has information about harvest practices as well. So if anyone's interested in getting a checklist for forested lands, come talk to me after and I can send you one.
Or if you're on Zoom, we'll get you another
Yeah,
copy.
yeah.
Drop it in the chat,
Yes.
order a copy, and we'll get you.
Yeah. So how does it work getting your property certified? So you will go through the checklist on your own on your property and you'll write down any of your questions, concerns, and your plans. If you'd like some extra help, you can get a consultation from us right away. That would be myself or my colleague Emma, who is not here, but her contact info will be later in the slide. And you can talk with us about your goals, what you want to improve, and we'll give you some recommendations for your property. And we'll talk through the checklist with you if you want it that way. If you don't need the extra help and you're ready to get started, you can use this checklist and everything that you write down in your questions and concerns. And you can make those improvements on your own, taking before and after photos so that we can see the progress that you've made on the property. And then after you've gone through those steps, you can send us your photos of your completed landscape and schedule a site visit with us. We'll go through the checklist with you and we'll tally up your points. And if you are certified, then you can get the lovely sign. Some of this, so the first site visit and consultation is free. After that, we do charge a small rate and the signs are $30, but a lot of the improvements are priceless when it comes to conserving wildlife and protecting landscapes. I would also like to use this as an opportunity to plug our plant sale. If you want to do the checklist, you've gone through all of it and you know what improvements you want to make, you can then source some of your native plants that you want to plant with our plant sale. We've got all sorts of things. We've got perennials, we've got bare root trees and shrubs, seed mixes and things like that. And each plant is labeled with what sorts of landscape it would be good for and what sorts of conservation things it would be providing to your landscape, whether that's pollinator habitat or if it's great for a rain garden, things like that. It's all listed on the plant IDs. So I also have plant sale catalogs back there, and I would love to send them to online attendees.
When's the plant sale officially end?
Yes, so our plant sale pre-orders are due by the 28th, which is Tuesday, which is coming up really quickly. So make your orders soon if you're going to. And if you'd like to talk about any of these plants that we have offered or want a little bit of advice for what you think, what we might think would be good for your landscape, I'm also open for those kinds of questions too. And so here's our contact information. So those are the two office numbers that you'll be able to reach either Emma or I by. There are our emails, and that is our website, which also has more information about the checklist and different criteria, more specifics on each criteria and what we're really looking for. And so, yeah, I would love to open the floor for questions, if anyone has any.
I have a couple of questions.
Oh.
So it's Bert from Zoomland. So there's an office in every county. Is there an office in Hancock?
There is a Hancock County Soil and Water District. I'm not sure if they do this program. I won't.
Okay.
Yeah. I want to say I don't know if they do or not, but you can definitely look up the Hancock County Soil and Water and they would have it on their website if they do. Yeah.
I do know,
Okay.
I remember down near Hancock County in the Ellsworth area.
Mm-hmm.
And they say that, and they're actually on the Soil and Water Conservation District
Oh,
Board.
yeah.
They do have a plant sale. They do very similar activities, but because they're a separate district, a separate area, we'll have to contact them.
Yes.
Instead of.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they do have some similar programs, but we.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we had a question in the room. Yes.
Where you were located.
Oh, yeah. So we're in the Androscoggin Valley. So we're Androscoggin County and Saginaw County.
But where's your office?
Oh, our office is located in Lewiston.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about for, I live in Thorndike.
Okay.
I think it's either one. Or it could be Knox.
Mhm.
I can't remember.
Yeah, if it's Waldo or Knox, they also do a conservation landscape certification. Yeah, so you'll be able to find it on their website. Yeah.
We've been there for 6 months.
Oh, yeah, awesome.
We don't have any more questions on Zoom in the chat, it doesn't look
Mm-hmm.
like. Does anybody else in the room have any more questions?
Yes.
Yes, those, papers you had for the plant sale,
Mhm.
are they available for somebody that might like to buy some, but don't
Oh,
know?
yes. Yeah.
What?
So we've got handouts on the table back there of the catalog. Feel free to take as many as you need. I don't think I printed that many, but yeah, please take a catalog if you think you're interested in looking through. And then we also have a flyer there for the plant sale that has the website link for how to get to it and how to like
Okay.
make a purchase. Yeah.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions, we'll take just a 5-7 minute break. Everyone can stretch their legs, get another snack, go potty, and then we'll come back and we'll start with Nicole on the main Forest Service.
Thank you, Zoom people. I'm gonna disappear now.
We'll put it on mute and we'll
Oh, yeah.
give the Zoom people a break too.
Think that they're quite dead on there, but there was a lot then. I think I seen a couple of them, but I did take the vacuum till it, not just change the bag once we leave. But I would keep an eye because there was a bunch of the moth ones flying around over here in the litter. Yeah, but they probably got disturbed when you probably moved them, and then they flew everywhere. Okay, yeah, you got it. meeting.
Audio. Can folks online hear me okay?
And then
I think we muted you, so maybe you can't tell us.
video.
Oh, turn on the video too.
You should be good to go.
Okay. Volume okay for people sitting here? I can yell if need be. All right. Very good. Hi, everyone. My name's Nicole Rogers. I'm the landowner outreach forester with the Maine Forest Service. I'm based out of Augusta, but I'm statewide, and I work with folks like Julie to help with statewide education and outreach programming. And part of that is our new cost share program, which I'm going to be talking about towards the end of this. Was anyone on the Maine Woodland Owners webinar last night? Oh, great. You're going to get double duty on this. Okay. But I have changed it up a little, I promise.
That just means you're gonna be an expert and now John can teach about it.
Amazing. We love peer-to-peer learning, so that works great for me. The other thing that Julie asked if I would talk about today is just what this term resilience means. I was talking with a consulting forester about a month ago, and he's like, oh, that's just the new trendy word of the day. I've never been called trendy in my life, so I had a little chuckle about that, but he's not wrong. We're hearing this word come up a lot, and so I think it's worth spending some time just talking about at least what we mean at Maine Forest Service when we're talking about resilience. Oh, I see what you mean here, Olivia.
Yeah, it's like down.
It is weird down there. Okay. So we'll start off with just what is resilience? What do we mean when we say this term? Why does it matter? And at least for me, this term can feel a little bit ambiguous sometimes. So I find it helpful to see some examples from out in the woods. I've heard other people say, well, you know when you know, and that's great until you're constructing a program around resilience and it needs to be a little more than you know when you know. So we'll do a little bit of you know when you know, but hopefully with some examples that help clarify, and then spend some time talking about this new cost share program. So I know at least one person in the room has some forest land. Do other folks have forest land that you're owning and thinking about? Okay, so this could be for you, this could be for friends or family. We have a bunch of invasives at my son's school, and my husband is going to call up the school and say, hey, did you know there's this cost share? So feel free to spread the word, even if this isn't maybe a program you'll be tapping into directly. We want this to get out. We want this to help as many Maine landowners as we can, and we're happy to have you help us spread that message. Oh, well, that went away, but that's okay. Imagine a white text box in the back here so you can read this. So this says, if you can, what is resilience and why does it matter? And I would just be curious before I tell you what I think it means, if this is a term that folks have heard tossed around, does anyone have some ideas? Like when we talk about a resilient forest, does that mean anything? Do people have thoughts on what that could be?
Does that like be destroyed by change? Feels like.
Yes. Yep. Any other ideas or thoughts?
Ability to withstand damage or activity.
Now, have you heard this term before, Olivia?
Yes, but I'm taking a guess. I don't know the actual definition.
Yeah.
I'm here to learn as well.
I used to be a teacher, so I'm super comfortable just being like, we'll just sit here until someone says something. So thanks all for passing that along. All right, so when we talk about resilience in the context of our program, and I wouldn't say this is an official Maine Forest Service definition, but it's the one that we've been using for presentations and things like this. We say that a resilient forest or forest resilience measures how well a forest adapts and responds to changing conditions. So hit the nail on the head with that one. A resilient forest can resist disturbance, such as intense windstorms, recover after insect outbreaks. You could also add in invasive plants. That could be another piece of this. While some trees or species may be lost, the forest ecosystem endures. And the two key words for me in that whole definition are the ability to adapt and respond. So it's a forest that really can take a whole bunch of stuff that's coming at it and continue to be a forest. It may not be the forest we saw before, whatever the disturbance was. It may look very different, but it's still a forest as opposed to a forest that's been lost and now has turned into some other kind of ecosystem or, God forbid, a parking lot. So why does resilience matter? Why do we care about these forests that can essentially bounce back? And at least for me, this is one of those pictures, 1,000 words kind of reasons. So we're seeing a lot more stuff like this. This is a windstorm up in Aroostook County. This was on the edge of, someone had cut some trees the year before a big windstorm came in and a whole swath of trees got knocked down. Now that may have happened no matter what. That was a pretty intense windstorm. But when we think about resilience, we're thinking about, are there things we could do in advance so that the impact of a storm like this is going to be at least minimize and again continue to keep that forest as forest. So it's great to say, well, this is our definition in words of what's a resilient forest, but at least for me, I find it challenging to then say, well, what does that actually mean? Like, what am I actually going to do to make a forest resilient? What are some tangible activities that I can do in my woods to make it more adaptable to whatever's coming its way? Anyone have any ideas? Like what could you do to a forest to make it resilient? Yeah, that's a conversation that's been going on for a long time out in the West. And it's a conversation that's starting to move for us here in the East too. Just got a call the other day. Like, what do I need to do to make my forest basically not go up in smoke?
Well, we're facing a severe drought.
Exactly. Yep.
People aren't aware of these campfires, a little spark, and if you have underbrush, it's gone.
Yep, absolutely.
And
So
that comes in.
yeah, gosh, let's hope we've got some time before we turn into one of those cinder blocks, huh? But absolutely, it's a real concern people are thinking about. So thinking about what's going on in the understory, maybe getting rid of some of that if you can. Are there other things folks have in mind? Yeah.
Diversity of species in Maine.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I'm full of a lot of cliches today, but that saying, right, like not all your eggs in one basket, that's a really important piece too when we're thinking about resilient forests, is making sure we've got a lot of different species, if it's appropriate, within our forest, so that if something comes through, when something comes through, we have more species than not that can continue to hang around. So I made
reforestation.
Reforestation, yeah, absolutely. So if you're thinking about either a forest that maybe for whatever reason stopped being a forest and you want to get those trees back in there, that's step one for having a resilient forest, is actually to have some trees there. Now, one of the things that's maybe frustrating when we talk about resilient forests and how to get there is that the answer ultimately is it depends. Like, what are your objectives? What are you trying to achieve? What are you looking to have for in your forest? So there is no absolute list of things you must do, conditions you must meet, good and bad, depending on how you feel about that. But things like having a species that's growing on site, I can talk about what that means in just a second. So again, this is my list, but it's not absolute. Having multiple species, having multiple size classes, so a mix of small and large trees and everything in between. Healthy forest, this is another one of those terms. It's pretty broad, and my definition of healthy forest may be very different than your definition of healthy forest, but being aware of things that could come in and potentially do some damage to your forest, that's going to be a key piece of all this. And it really comes down to things like thoughtful and long-term planning. So these programs like Lily is talking about, that's a critical step, whether you're doing resilient forests on 2 acres or 100 acres, thinking about a long-term plan definitely isn't going to hurt when we're talking about resilient forests. And so remember I said this is a trendy, newish term. It's not that new, but it is something a lot of folks are thinking about. And so when I was getting ready for this presentation, I was wondering if someone had done a better job than me of making some kind of visual display of what this can mean, and they did, or at least I think they did. So this is a paper from a British researcher, and what they're doing is basically just depicting graphically what they think a resilient forest means. And so if you start up here in the upper left-hand corner, that's the forest before the disturbance. If that forest is resilient, they give you a list of things that might be included in there, like genetic diversity, species diversity. When they're talking about trait diversity, it could be having a mix of species that can persist in the sun versus persist in the shade. Things like the ability of those tree species to respond and adapt as an individual. How well do they reproduce? So all those kind of characteristics might make a forest more resilient than less. Then this disturbance comes in. Let's see if I can use this. Oh, there we go. And whether that's something, again, they give you a list. High winds, heat wave, pests, pathogens, prolonged drought. Those disturbances are inevitably going to come in. They're going to take out some of the trees. They're going to have an impact on your forest, and it's going to be changed. Now, our hope is that if it's a resilient forest, once this curve starts to tick up again, that's when you're in a recovery period. And if your forest is resilient, you will eventually be able to make your way back towards something like what you had before. Again, could be different species, could be different size classes, but you'll still have a forest if your forest is ultimately resilient.
So this slide
Yep.
is, in my view, missing one of the most significant causes of disturbance in Maine, which is clear cutting.
Yeah.
Sure. I can't see who's speaking, or I would.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's Bert.
Oh, hi, Bert. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, I mean, if you go up to the Western Mountains or you go into the Northern Kingdom, which are all industrial forests, you'll see big swaths of clear-cut forest, which is an intense disturbance, right?
Yep, sure is.
And it goes on continuously. Everything was cut down in Maine, at least twice, and some stuff's been cut down 3 times. Then it has mostly come back, but it's an uncontrolled experiment. We don't actually know how many times you can do that and still get something back, whether you degraded the substrate that everything grows in, or that compounded with drought and climate change prevents things from coming back. Woolly adelgid kills our hemlocks. So, I think that I think clear cutting is still probably should be at the top of this list.
Well, and this could be a relic of where this graphic comes from. So this one comes from the United Kingdom. To be honest, I don't know what their
They don't have forests,
look like
so
over
they don't.
there.
They don't have forests, so they don't do clear cutting.
Well, they have some trees, but I don't know what it looks like for them specifically. I will say there is a research project going on at the University of Maine. It's called the Maine Adaptive Silviculture Network. And one of the things they are looking at in a variety of different forest types across the state are these studies of exactly what you're talking about. How does a forest respond to some of our business as usual forestry practices, including things like clear cut or even, different intensities of removal? The thing about all of these studies, we need time. We need time to understand them. We can see that from a lot of the work that's happened at some of our experimental forests through the U.S. Forest Service. The things we think we know in year 1 or 5 or 10 are really different than the things we know at year 50, 60, 100. So I don't have a good answer for you in terms of what that's going to look like, but I'll certainly be keeping an eye on those results too, because I think you're right. There's a question of what we're doing. Is it sustainable? How long is it sustainable? And at least for me, I feel better when I see some data to help me make those decisions. But any kind of disturbance has potential to alter either big magnitudes or small magnitudes our forest. And when we think about resilience, It's acknowledging what is that disturbance and what can I do to make sure that what I get back on the other end is a forest that can continue to recover. That's a really important piece of this discussion. Okay, so remember I gave you a couple of things that in my definition might make a forest more resilient. So one of those is being on site. Is that a term folks have heard before? Does that mean something to people?
Present.
Yeah, you're right there on site. Yep. Okay. Anyone want to wager? Anyone good at tree ID want to wager what this forest is? No, it looks like it though, doesn't it? Good guess. A hint is all the ferns in the bottom. The wet forest. So this is a silver maple floodplain forest from right outside of Fort Kent. This time of year, there's going to be a couple of feet of water sitting right where that photo is taken. This is a great example of a species that is adapted to where it currently lives. So silver maple is one of those species we often see along waterways, right? Because it can have some water sitting there for a little while. It doesn't want to be sitting in a lake all year long, but it is comfortable with some water coming and going. So this is a great example of a tree species that is adapted to that site. If you were trying to put white pine right on this river corridor, it would not be happy at all. So when we're thinking about resilience, one of the very first questions we can ask ourselves is what does nature think should be here where this forest is now? And am I going to be fighting against nature the whole time, or am I going to be working with nature? So for me anyway, that's the first question I ask. What does nature think should be here, and am I helping that, or am I sort of running up the hill against it?
People, and those of you who are local, if you think like right up the road here, where Lake Shore Drive comes off from 106, where the Dead River meets Androscoggin Lake, that is another silver maple floodplain, just exactly like what people subscribe to.
Yeah, they're beautiful in about a month.
Yeah, I mean, that's not Aaron's problem, but if you go along the interstate, you see all these, what I thought maybe once was a beautiful pine grove, and they're all dead.
I do my darndest not to travel the interstate, so I don't know. Does anyone else know?
Heading north, probably after, in the road wax, when it's going back.
I mean, there are some, I don't know if this is what's happening there, but there are some forest health impacts that are impacting pine. It also can be really susceptible to road salt. So
Yeah.
you can start to see the foliage dying off after a tough winter.
Yeah, it just seemed like it was too far off. Like
Yeah.
just along the way, but like swampy and farther off. I didn't
Well-
know if maybe the road had displaced them.
I mean, it's entirely possible. Yep. I don't know for certain, but it's possible. So if something had happened that altered sort of the site where those pine were growing,
Yeah.
and it was hospitable when they started and it's not hospitable now, trees are super, super resilient individuals. Like I have seen them growing out of cracks in a sidewalk or, places that you would never expect to see a tree. But is it thriving? No, they can grow. But for them to thrive, and when we think about this context of resilience, to especially be able to respond to all kinds of stuff coming at once, they're going to do better, just like we would if you're in a place where you're healthy and happy. So I'm going to, next time I travel the interstate, I'll keep an eye out and see what that is.
But maybe there's somebody already studying that, and I just went.
Yeah, no, I don't know that. I don't know that off the top of my head. So another piece that's important when we think about resilience is this mix of species and size classes. And I think this is a nice representation of that. And again, I'll talk about this a little bit further down. You don't have to do all of this in every spot everywhere, right? This isn't like a checklist that you must have in every acre of forest land that you own, but it's things just to be thinking about. So here we see a whole mix of different hardwood species and softwood species. We've got big trees, we've got small trees. Now, depending on what your goals are, this may be perfect for you, or it may not. But the idea is that if you're able to have a mix of size classes, if you're able to have a mix of species, there are some diseases that we know are most prolific among smaller trees. There are some insects that are most prolific for certain species. By mixing it up a little bit, again, you may not have the forest that you originally started with after whatever your disturbance is, but you're more likely than not to continue to have forests, and that's part of the goal. Of course, diseases and insects are a huge piece of what's going on in our forest, and it seems like that landscape is constantly changing, and it really is tough to keep up with what's the best practice. So this is a northern hardwood forest. that, a decade ago we would have been like, well, there's a fair amount of diseased beech in there. I don't love that, but oh, look at those beautiful ash trees. Well, now all of a sudden, right, that's not necessarily as resilient as we might have thought before. So there are some old challenges. We have beech bark disease. This has been here for a long time. But in the irony of great ironies, it seemed like we were really starting to get a handle on what to do about those diseased beech. And then all of a sudden we have this arrival of beech leaf disease. So here we're looking at it in the very early stages. You can see that banding, the dark lines on some of those leaves. And in some places where this has been for 3 or 4 years, it's already causing mortality. It looks really catastrophic. So, 10 years ago, I don't know that anyone, at least I wasn't paying attention to what's going on with beech leaf disease. And now I'm thinking about it a lot. And it's just another example of you have to plan for things you don't even know that are coming, which is challenging, right? So let's play a game. Does this look like a resilient forest to anyone?
Head shakes on Zoom.
Yeah. I mean, the short answer could be, I don't know.
Looks skinny to me.
Say that again?
Looks skinny.
They are skinny, yeah. So these are some relatively unhappy red pine. These were planted on a site that probably doesn't fit for them. They are too dense. They've been allowed to grow up too tightly for too long. Their crowns are minimal. The soil isn't a good fit for them. They're just not, I don't know, they're not thriving. They're there. They've been there for a while. They might be there for a while longer, but they're not thriving. So when we think about a forest like this, you can let it keep trucking along. Nature does remarkable things all the time without our intervention. But in this forest, this is a scenario we're thinking about really seriously. This is a windstorm, not the exact same forest, but a very similar forest. A windstorm came through, it snapped all the tops off. And now you've got, if you look at this forest, I know it's a little bit hard to see from where you're sitting, but there's not much in the way of other trees that are coming up underneath. There's not much in the way of a diversity of species that are present. And now when a windstorm comes in and snaps the top off all these trees, well, what's going to come back? I don't know, maybe something that we're excited about, something that's healthy and able to continue on. But in this day and age, it just as easily could be a whole bunch of invasives, right? So if you're not thinking ahead about what might happen in the event of a windstorm or, again, something unforeseen, there's just a chance that you might get caught a little and say, oh, shoot, that was not the outcome I was looking for. Yeah.
Okay. I've got a question because we've been talking about taking out the understory to make it fireproof, right?
Sure.
But one of the reasons that looked not resilient was because there was nothing under the trees. So what's the balance there, I guess?
Yeah,
that's really my question.
So again, when I used to teach, my students get so frustrated with me because my answer was always, well, it depends. What are you trying to do? And that's what I would say here. So there are very real scenarios out in nature where a forest will be sort of all one group of ages. It will grow up really dense and dark, and then it will start to break apart and it'll be a beautiful forest. And that's just nature doing what nature does. What makes, to me, this forest not resilient this was an old ag field. This was planted as part of CC, I think it was the CCC plantings that were happening, and they were just trying to get trees out on the ground. They were trying to put people to work. They were just trying to get some trees planted, and it was an activity and plant and move on. So a scenario like this or a forest type like this, where maybe you do have single age or single species, could be more resilient if you lined those species up with the site where they should be, if you paid attention to the density of the trees that are there. So it doesn't all have to be, 25 different species with trees this big, this big, this big all the way. There's a balance to be had to align with your goals. And then there's also a way to recognize, when you do have a single species stand or a single age stand, some strategies like maybe doing some thinnings to break it up so they're not quite so dense, or maybe creating some small canopy gaps so a few new trees can get started underneath. Those are things that you could try that might, they're not going to change the condition overnight, but they might move you slowly towards a more resilient forest. So when something like a windstorm or whatever does come, you've already got some other things in the queue to keep going. And your district forester, like Julie, is a great resource to go out and walk and talk with you, because every forest is unique and different, and you really want to tailor it for your goals and what's going on where you are. Yeah, Fritz.
Does the placement of the trees impact resilience? So when I see these reforested fields or whatnot, you often see them in linear formations, square linear, very human engineered. In best practices now, does that, is that a factor?
Yeah, it can be. So I would say resilience is also something you need to think about scale. Am I talking about, and I'm going to get your answer, I promise, even if it sounds long-winded. Am I talking about resilience on my acre, or am I talking about resilience across a landscape? Now, there is this concept, if you'll all bear with me, that basically says we need forests in all kinds of conditions, including those planted stands that grow really fast because it helps us generate things like toilet paper, which I'm a fan of, paper, wood products. So there is a balance to be had for having some of our forests in really high production, because by putting some of our forests in a really quick growing environment, it allows us to have other places of our forest that are fully conserved. It allows us to have other places in our forest where we have a mix of conditions. So that is one argument for thinking about this at a landscape scale. So now back to your question, Fritz. Like if I was thinking at a landscape scale, seeing a high production forest, well, I might say, you know what, that's not super resilient necessarily on that acre, but in the landscape conversation, it is an important piece. So if I'm going to do that, how do I do that in a way that does sort of help out this resilience conversation? So it could be things like not necessarily having just one species in a planted forest, but having a mix of species. It could be thinking about having really good genetic stock for the species that you're going to be planting, like making sure the trees that I plant into the ground are the ones that have shown to have some resistance to X disease or insect. And then there is also this idea that when you plant trees in the ground, you want to put them in the very best condition for them. So if you've ever seen a tree planting crew, one of the things they're doing is they're kind of walking around and they have a general area where they know they need to put a tree, but they're looking for like a little mound where maybe that tree is going to get more nutrients if it's sitting up here on the top, or needs a little shade, so it's going to go further down on the mound. So there is some science to that. Now, does that happen every time? No, but it does happen sometimes. So that's my long-winded answer.
Are you able to recommend species to replace with this forest?
For this particular forest?
Well, I'm just saying in general, a forest like this that's gone down.
Yeah.
What species would you recommend? Pinus strobus, or birch, or
Yeah.
spruce?
Again, I think it depends on what you're trying to achieve and what you've got going on. If in this particular forest, one of the first things I might do is take a look outside of the planted forest and see what's going on kind of nearby to give me a cue about what species might be a good fit in that particular ecosystem. Sometimes it's going to be, like, are you looking for trees that are going to live a really long time to create a certain wildlife habitat? Are you looking to basically just get your forest reforested quickly? And so do you need to find some species that are going to grow faster sooner? So it's going to be a conversation about what you're trying to achieve, what you have access to. The other piece is, what can you get for seedlings? Where can you get them from? So there's no one right size fits all, but I would say think about local species. Think about what might be on your property or your neighbor's property that seems to be doing well. Again, talk with a district forester or a consulting forester to get out with you and say, hey, this seems like a good fit for your property and your goals. But I'm always in favor of Maine-based species and species that do well in Maine ecosystems.
Well,
No,
isn't it? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think often these red pine forests, and we see them all over in Maine, were planted as a potential commercial crop, but nobody wants red pine. It's the mills don't like it because it's sticky. So we're stuck with these red pine forests as they are.
Yep.
Unless the state or the feds decide to put up significant amount of money so that somebody can go in there and at least partially harvest these and let some light down onto the bottom so that something else can grow. Otherwise, this is going to be here until either you get a windstorm like you pictured and they're all gone, or a forest fire or something like that. And they've been here long enough shading the understory. That's why there's nothing growing there.
Yep, absolutely. And so there will be times where you can't do anything. That's just a reality, right? Or you can only do a little bit at a time. It may not be a total reset. It may not be a full move from a less than to a fully resilient forest. We can all only do what we can do with the resources we have available. And sometimes, unfortunately, we make a plan in 1975 that we think is going to pay off for us in 2025, and the conditions have entirely changed, and we're stuck with what we did or what someone else did a long time ago. That is a pretty common tale across Maine's forests. Is there another question?
Red pine native.
And there are places that it does really, really wonderful. Like Flagstaff has an old growth red pine forest that's just beautiful. Yeah.
Not always where it was.
Yeah.
This is the logic of patchwork cutting too, I think, when you do logging, right? Cut a little circle and it's surrounded by the native trees, and they just feed into that dead circle that you've created and grow up again.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you're not able, interested, whatever your reason is, if your forest isn't ready or you're not ready or whatever for a larger, more intensive operation, there are lots of ways you can do things at a smaller scale that can really have a benefit. Creating a smaller canopy gap, trying to get some species in there can be an excellent place to start or an excellent place to stop. It really does depend on what you're trying to achieve. So
you can make money with the patchwork, with the cutting.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. If markets are good. The other thing to keep in mind when we talk about resilience, and this doesn't always come up, is that resilience can also be things like, can I get to my forest? When can I get to my forest? Can I get to my forest after we've had a really, really sloppy rainstorm? Can I get to my forest only in the wintertime when we've had a really cold winter and the ground is frozen? Some of those things you can change, some of those things you can't change. You can't, if you can figure out how to determine what's going on in our winters, let me know. But there are conditions we just don't have a handle on, but it's good for your long-term planning to be aware of how that may or may not tie your hands with getting into your forest. Resilience can also align with a whole bunch of other goals. Like I was just talking to someone the other day that has a sugar bush that they'd like to make more resilient, but their primary goal is to have a sugar bush. That tends to mean let's have some well-producing sugar maple trees. What do I do in that if I want to increase the resilience of my forest? Well, in that particular example, it could be things like, do you have any red maple you want to support? We know that just having a little bit of red maple in with a sugar maple can prevent those forests from being as prone to some things like tent caterpillar. Or when you see some trees, little sugar maples that are trying to get started, are you in a place to help them, continue to grow? Do you have a bunch of deer that tend to eat everything you're trying to grow? Are you able to put up some cages? So going with something like resilience doesn't mean you have to ignore all your other goals. In fact, I would argue a resilient forest really does let you meet many goals at once. How you go about doing that really will depend on what your primary objectives are. And again, you don't have to do this all at once. Things can happen in steps. It's not all or nothing. This is my dad's woodlot up in Belfast. He has some cedar that's been there for quite a while. They're not super happy. This isn't a cedar stand. These came up after an old field, and we'll probably never see a forest like this again. My dad knows that this is maybe not the forest that's going to be his forest of the future, but he's got a sentimental attachment to it, and he's not ready to make a big shift into something else that might be more suited for that site. That's fine. I'm not going to tell him that he has to do that. He's not going to do that. So there can be things that you do, again, that align with what you're trying to achieve, what your forest is telling you it's trying to achieve, and just the realities of the world we're all living in. So you can do baby steps. That's okay. All right. Again, so that's kind of the overview of what's going on with resilience. Let's talk about how you might actually be able to achieve some of this stuff. So apologies. This says resources for resilience. District foresters, great resource. Maine woodland owners, great resource. Conservation districts, great resource. There are a lot of people in Maine doing a lot of interesting things to try and help landowners have resilient, healthy, happy forests. If you don't know who your district forester is, well, if you live here, you're lucky you've got Julie, but everyone on staff is really, really excellent. I can share these slides with folks afterwards. There's a live link at the bottom so you can figure out who your district forester is. Just plug in your town and it'll tell you who that person is. But these people are so good at what they do, in part because they used to be practicing foresters before they were with Maine Forest Service, so they really understand the realities of what it means to work and live in the woods. Okay, so we have this new cost share program called the WoodsWise Resilience Program. This is where we actually offer some funding for landowners who want to try and implement practices in their forest to make it more resilient. This is a grant-funded program. We've got $9 million. We have 5 years for this program, ending in about 2029, we think. The money comes from 2 different pots. That doesn't matter a whole heck of a lot for the work that you as a landowner might do in the woods, but it has a little bit to do with who gets paid from which funding stream. So that's why I put this up there. So we got $4 million from a funding stream for climate mitigation and forest resilience. We We got $5 million from a funding stream for carbon stewardship, and all this money comes from U.S. Forest Service programming. Some of who is eligible for these programs was given to us by the U.S. Forest Service, and some of this eligibility was crafted by us at the Maine Forest Service. So for folks that were going to get paid out of a climate resilience funding stream, non-industrial landowners, so family forest landowners, local and tribal government, we're going to key this money towards people that have between 10 and 1,000 acres, potentially up to 5,000 acres. If you're on the upper end of that acreage ownership, just get in touch with us because you'll need some prior approval from the Maine Forest Service. The second funding stream, so this is the carbon stewardship. This just requires you to be a private owner. So if you maybe do a bunch of walking in your town forest and you're seeing a bunch of invasives and you want to say, hey, did you know there's money through the Maine Forest Service to do this? We've got funding for those folks. If you're a private citizen, private ownership, you'd be eligible for both of these funding streams.
Can the property be in tree growth?
It can be in tree growth. Yep, sure can. All right. The program is live now, but we've really only opened up one of these funding streams. Again, it doesn't matter a whole heck of a lot for landowners going through the program. We will get you connected with the funding stream that's appropriate for you, but just know that the climate funding is online and the carbon funding is going to open up this summer.
So we have an invasive species, I think it's within H. It's pretty and it has berries that birds love, but that are terrible for them. Honeysuckle. Is that something that we can get some support on?
Yep.
Because that's been a real headache of concern of ours. So that's pretty.
Yeah, absolutely. Invasive plants and invasive plant removal is a part of this for sure. Another piece that is part of this funding, this comes to us from the U.S. Forest Service. When we got these grants, one of the things they said was, we'd really like you to use this money to the best of your ability to connect with what are considered historically underserved landowners. So if any of you have ever worked with NRCS, like you've done an EQIP plan or a CSP plan, you maybe are familiar with how the USDA defines historically underserved landowners. There's a link here if you want to read into any of these in more detail, but they're what are considered beginning farmer and forest landowners. So these are folks that have owned their land for less than 10 years. Limited resource producers. So these are household financial caps that define whether you're a limited resource producer, veterans, socially disadvantaged landowners, and then this piece, which is specific, I think, to our program. So it's called geographically underserved. So you're looking here at the state of Maine, all those areas in green are communities that are considered geographically underserved. How does a community get to be geographically underserved? It's a composite of data. So things like access to education, some metrics from DOT about access to reliable transportation, household income, just general poverty levels within communities. All those get combined. If you basically get a high enough number with that combined data set, you become green. If you're green, you're considered geographically underserved. Another piece that folks always ask about is, what the heck is going on with northern Piscataquis County? Aren't there underserved people there? Absolutely there are. There's not enough of them there, so they didn't get tallied in the data set. So there are some places on this map, admittedly, where we know there are underserved communities, but our hands are a little bit tied in terms of the data we can use to make those distinctions. So if you're a person who lives in one of these historically underserved communities or geographically underserved communities, or your property is in a geographically underserved community, what that means is through our program, you get access to a higher reimbursement rate for the practices that you apply. And I'll talk about that in just a second. So let's talk about the practices that are supported through this program. 3 categories of practices. We have early stand tending, regeneration support, forest health. I'll go through the specific practices in each one of those categories here in just a second. When we were thinking about what practices to cover as part of this program, we wanted to focus on those that we know are cost prohibitive. So hearing from folks like yourself, I'd really love to do X, but I can't because it's too costly for me. We talked to consulting foresters, we talked about it amongst ourselves at Maine Forest Service, and so that's how we came up with these practices. And again, we wanted to focus on things that help you meet multiple objectives. So what are the actual practices? We've got this category of early stand tending. So this is when we would do early intervention in a stand, like some of those, that red pine stand we saw a few slides back. Someone had done some early intervention in that. Maybe we'd find ourselves with a more resilient forest now. So these are thinning practices, whether that's pre-commercial thinning, so your really tiny stems, whether that's early commercial thinning, so slightly larger, or crop tree release where you're walking around and finding the best crop tree and releasing it by removing trees around it. Those are the 3 practices in our early stand tending category. The idea behind these thinnings is if you get the number of trees down in these really dense stands, they're going to be more resilient to diseases and insects, drought, fire, etc. The second category, regeneration support. So these are actions that we're going to take to either help trees that are naturally getting established in our forest or when we need to go in and do some planting. So we'll support planting, so things like assisted migration, which we heard about earlier from Lily, adding things like tree tubes or exclosures for protecting that regeneration so they don't get all munched down by deer or other critters. And then some larger things like potentially creating canopy gaps or doing some rehabilitation from forests that have been cut over pretty heavily in the past and maybe need a heavier hand to get reset. So that's all under our regeneration support bucket. And then our last bucket is the forest health intervention. So things like invasive plant management, whether that's chemical or mechanical control, and then sanitation cutting. So this would be, think about our forests that have a lot of beech leaf disease. Maybe you just recognize you got to get those beech trees out of there and let some other species get started. You could do that through sanitation. Emerald ash borer, hemlock woolly adelgid. If you've got a forest that has trees that are really prone to a forest health concern, sanitation might be a good fit.
So get back to my question about clear cutting. So in the context of the regeneration program, can you give put a little more color on exactly what you do in that program? Do you support or help fund replanting?
Yeah, so one of the practices that we will fund through this program is planting. So that could be, like maybe you purchased some property that had been cut really heavily in the past and it just did not regenerate well. We see that all the time, right? Like the forest got cut really hard and what's come back is a bunch of grass and little red maple stump sprouts. And you would like to see some longer lived species that would have been there prior to that harvesting. You could go in and you could plant some trees there in that forest and that would be covered as part of this program. It could also be things like you want to experiment with pulling up some species that are south of us. I wouldn't say too far south, like don't go to Florida and try and bring a species back up here, but a species that sort of represents Maine forests already. You could plug in a few of those individually across your forest. So planting can be at a larger scale or a smaller scale, really depending on what you're trying to achieve. Other questions about these practices? So if you are going to participate in this program, you have to work with what's called a resilience forester. These are foresters that have gone through a training with us. You need to complete one of those practices. That's how you are eligible for the funding, is by actually doing one of those eight or nine practices that I just talked about. If you are already working with a forester, awesome. Check with them and see if they've gone through our training. If you're working with a forester and they haven't, let them know we have another training coming up on May 4th. We'd love them to attend. It's virtual, so hopefully access is easy for folks. And if you would like to participate in this program, but you don't have a forester, we actually have a list up on our website. You can find that on the live link here. Those are all of the people who have gone through our training so far and are considered resilience foresters. This list continually gets updated, so feel free to check back in. We have about 80 people, or we will have about 80 foresters that have gone through the training by the end of next month. Oh, I don't know what that was.
Whoa.
That's okay. I think some stuff got, whatever. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's okay. No worries. I can ad lib. There was a nice graphic here, I think, of a checklist. So visualize that if you will. So when we pay for work that happens as part of this program, you can think about it as work that leads up to planning. So working with your consulting forester to go out, walk your property and figure out what exactly you should do as part of this program. The actual implementation of the practices, so the work that has to happen to make that practice happen, and then close out things like finishing up paperwork. So we have mechanisms within this program to pay for all of those parts. Some details in terms of what we can pay for. So there is a maximum amount that a landowner is eligible for as part of this program, so not to exceed $20,000. This is where we get back to that idea of, are you an underserved landowner or not? If you are what's considered an underserved landowner, you're eligible to have up to 90% of that $20,000 reimbursed. If you're not underserved, it's 60%. We also have a few other sort of sideboards on the things that we can pay for as part of this practice. So you will work with your consulting forester to have them write you a practice plan. That's really the how and why and what of the work that's going to be done. We'll pay up to $500 per plan or $200 for each additional practice. So it takes some time and energy to get a plan crafted. We have money to help do that. We can pay for the forester's time to walk the property, to oversee the practice itself. And if you're a landowner who might want to do work yourself, we also have funding in here so that you can do that and basically get paid on a per hourly rate. We also have specific amounts that are associated with getting the individual practices done. And again, the foresters who have gone through our training have seen all this information too. They have a budget template that they can walk you through and basically say, this is what I think it's going to cost to get this practice achieved. Here's how much you would be eligible for. Early commercial thinning. So thinning of slightly larger than these size trees. And if these terms are new to you, again, your consulting forester is going to be a really, really important person to help you navigate all of this. If you're a landowner going through the program, you can request reimbursement after your practice plan has been written, when half the work is done, or when all of the work is done. And just a quick example of, what are we talking about? Let's put some numbers behind all of this. So I think, unfortunately, this is going to be a common scenario. You have 3 acres of diseased beech. Your forester says, let's get those out of here. Let's do a sanitation cutting. But you don't have anything else underneath, so I'm going to recommend you do some planting as well. You also notice that you have a fair amount of deer browse. So you're looking at trying to do a variety of practices here to get you your end condition. So you're going to do that sanitation cut to get the diseased beech out. You're going to plant so that you have new species coming up underneath. And then you're going to add some tree tubes so they don't all get munched. That's all happening across 3 acres. So you have up to, your forester says it's going to take me about $900 to make you a practice plan that covers all of those expenses. They're going to do some oversight. They're going to walk the property. They're going to check where you should plant the trees. If there's any beech that you should keep, all that kind of stuff. They estimate that's going to cost about $600. It's going to cost $750 to do the sanitation, $2,200 and $2,250 to do the planting because that's more intensive. And you're going to put up tree tubes, which they estimate about $1,500. So you're looking at doing $6,000 worth of work. If you're an underserved landowner, you're eligible to get $5,400 back. If you're not underserved, you can get $3,600 back. So that's how the process works. And again, foresters going through this training have a budget template, so they can fill all this out with you, walk you through what you're eligible for, so there's no surprises.
So those values, those money values, is that the money that is given to the landowner to then give to the forester? Does it go straight to?
Yep. From the guidance from the Forest Service was we must pay landowners directly. We can't pay a contractor for you. So we would give you the check to then pay the forester, pay the contractor.
Oh, Nicole Johnson.
Yes.
Landowners reimbursement hourly at $25.15.
Yep.
Is that subject to the 90% or 60% payment, or is it going to be the full amount?
So the way it works is you tally up sort of different parts of what it costs to achieve a practice. So there is the actual practice implementation itself. That's where landowners doing the work themselves would get categorized. And of that, well, I always say this backwards. So you're going to figure out all the expenses to do the job. And we will then give you 90% of all the total expenses. How that gets broken up in planning, practice implementation, or closeout, it can vary. But we'll give you 90% of what it costs to do the practice up to your $20,000. Does that help?
Yes, so the landowner would, if he does the work himself, it would be, if he's not underserved, it would be 60% of the 25.
Yeah. So you'll get a check for, like, you give us a budget that tells us how the expenses were going to go, and then we give you a check for the full amount and basically say now you divvy it out where it needs to go after that. Yeah.
And is this all taxable?
Great question. So sort of. Cost share payments are considered taxable income. However, there are some scenarios where cost share payments can be excluded from your taxable income. We're looking to get some guidance on exactly when and where that happens. There's more clear guidance on that for programs like EQIP that have been running for a long time. This is a new program for the federal government, and we are still getting some documentation from them about what that means for landowners. So some parts probably will be taxable income and some parts probably won't be, but we'll have guidance for you hopefully soon about where those parts are. In terms of who does what in the program, you as the landowner are responsible for saying, I want to participate in the program and going to a site visit with your district forester. That's how this whole thing starts. Your resilience forester is going to be the person that handles the bulk of the paperwork for you. They're going to be the ones that get your application in, that say it's time to do closeout, submit your claim for payment paperwork. And your district forester is a partner through all of this. They're a really good contact to help you with questions, concerns as you go through the whole program. So the program is open. We have already started doing walk and talks. We've already had landowners submit paperwork to say that they're interested. The people who have gone through the program and had their walk and talk within the next 7 days, so by April 30th, we'll get an approval letter from us by by May 15th. The second round of applications will open up right after that. We'll let people know who've done their walk and talk by May 30th, whether or not they're approved by June 15th. But basically, if you get to a point where you're submitting an application, it's not a guaranteed approval, but it's pretty darn close. We don't want anyone getting to a place where they're doing the application if we don't think they're going to get approved. So if you want to participate in this program, you can start gathering things like old forest management plans if you've got those, maps if you've got them, just thinking about what your goals and objectives are if you haven't done that already, and then get in touch with your district forester. They're the first point of entry for this whole thing. So if your consultant isn't a resilience forester, that's okay. Let them know to join our training on the 4th or get in touch with me if they can't make that. If you're already involved in some other cost share programs like those that are being hosted through NRCS, you can still participate in this program too, but we're going to have some additional questions for you. Essentially, our money for this program, NRCS money, it all comes from the same pot, and the feds don't want to pay you to do the same work twice. So we'll have to ask some additional questions just to make sure that you're not doing one thing through NRCS and the exact same thing through us on those same acres. If you don't have a forester yet, but you would like to get started with a site visit with your district forester, that's okay. But you can't move through to the final application until you have a resilience forester on staff, essentially. So it makes sense to get in touch with folks now and just see if they're eligible and open to participate in this program with you. Oh, okay. And then,
Sorry, I didn't realize that was gonna do that.
don't worry about it. The last one was just maybe a cute picture of my dog. I can't actually remember what it was, but, and my phone number. So you can get in touch with me if you have questions about the program. You can get in touch with your district forester. They're a really great resource for you. Or just call Maine Forest General phone number, email, inbox, and we'll get back in touch.
Dropping your email and phone number in Zoom chat as well.
Cool. Thanks, Olivia.
Yes. Does anybody on Zoom have any questions?
You have a question on these invasive species, like the red vines that grow?
Yep.
That other gray type that grows. You cut the vines and my God, they got roots everywhere.
Yeah.
You can't get all the roots.
No, you can't. There is a really nice guide. It's a flip book from the Maine Natural Areas Program, and you can either get the physical flip book or you can find it a free downloadable PDF online. And for every invasive species, there's like a slightly tweaked way that it recommends you tackle them. So for some, it's the time of year. For some, it's the method of removal. A friend of mine says it's your worst long-term relationship, and he's not wrong. So it's just, you got to keep going back over and over again. And especially if you're going to do mechanical control, you really have to be prepared to invest a lot of time because they just take off.
You said that's through M now?
Mm-hmm. Yep. They're invasive for a reason because they're so good at surviving in our ecosystems, and they just put everything they have in it. Yeah.
Some of the older ones, the roots are that thick.
Yep.
How the heck do you cut through those? I got a tractor and I got wrap a chain around it.
Yep.
I'm trying to pull with a tractor, and that's so strong you can't even pull with a tractor.
Yep.
That's a Macy Ferguson.
Yep. I mean, yeah, they really are serious. So the best thing to do for invasives is to catch them early. Great advice, right? So or find where they're encroaching, because the sad truth is sometimes it's a battle we're going to fight for forever without much progress. But if you can catch it as it's starting to advance, where the root system isn't as established or the number isn't as high, that's where you can really start to see an impact.
Seems like they just come out of nowhere.
They do. This is a great time of year to start looking. because they pop up first in the spring and they stay longest in the fall. So if it's, everything else in the leaves have fallen off and something still looks green, there's a chance that's an invasive, or if it's showing up right now, there's a chance it's an invasive.
You gotta have a good handsaw.
Yep.
It took my husband and I a good part of one day just to unwind it from a maple tree.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
We just cut it, we unwound it because it was strangling.
It'll go 6 to 8 to 10 feet.
Oh, yeah, it was, and then, so what we ended up doing is then pulling it, and we kept on pulling it, he'd get part and I'd get part, and then we walked it all the way up, probably, a whole acre.
Yeah.
More.
Oh, yeah.
Up into the field to get it
It's unbelievable
away from
how
that tree.
that vine can just come out of nowhere and
Yeah,
just,
and that's what it looks like. It looks like there's no vine and then you
Yep.
keep pulling it.
oh, yeah.
Goes and goes and goes.
Oh, no.
Or, not to be sad, but you put in all that work and then you look at your neighbor's property and you say, shoot.
Well, yeah,
So,
it follows. I looked and I said to neighbors, that's a vine. Oh, but it's so pretty and
I
it's
know.
flowering. I said, but it's strangling the tree and the tree's gonna fall on your house.
one of the
My
really,
husband and I did it for them, but.
that was kind of, and it is, it's a challenge. Like knotweed is a really great pollinator plant and it's a really terrible invasive. So it can be beautiful. Yeah, I know.
It is.
They get in our landscape for a reason because they were nice ornamentals or played some important role, we thought, and then they just got out of hand. Yeah. But we've got money to help you take care of them if you're interested. So
I remember growing up and thinking how beautiful that vine was all over that house.
yeah.
When I was young, not knowing that vine will eat right under the shingles or whatever it is and separate bricks.
Once you become a homeowner, those things aren't as nice anymore, are they?
No, they aren't.
Okay. Well,
Any
thank you all.
questions, comments, concerns? Well, we still have Nicole in the hot seat.
Mm.
Appreciate having these sessions.
Oh, yeah,
We have
absolutely.
Quite a bit.
We are a membership-based organization, and because of our members, we are able to do things like this. So I would like to say thank you, first off, to everybody who is in this room and those of you on Zoom, because if you weren't here, if you didn't enjoy these things, if you didn't care about your land, if you didn't care at all, none of us would be here, right?
Right.
But thankfully, we all get to be here. We all got to hear what Nicole had to say. We all got to hear what Lily had to say. We got to learn from Chad. We got to learn from Julie. And now we all have a bunch of resources and a community in this room and online that we can rely on whenever we have questions or that we can work together with to better our environment. Yeah.
The next session, is it on site?
Yes, so that is what I wanted to wrap
Sounds
up with
good.
today. We might end a little bit early today, but that's okay. Next week, we are doing the walk over at Curtis Memorial Homestead. So it's going to be at the same time. For those of you on Zoom, I think a lot of you have registered for it, some of you have not. We will not be able to have a Zoom component for the outdoor portion, but what I will do is do my best to record our speakers who are going to be there with us. So Chad is going to try and be there with us to go over invasive species. Julie is going to be there. I'm going to be there. Is Sally?
Sally is supposed to be there as well, but if
Yes.
she's not, I will also be there talking about
Yep.
birds and also forest structure. One of the other things that we're gonna be doing if you wanted to, so we'll be walking the lower loop trail at the Curtis Homestead. It's a little bit shorter, but there is another walk afterwards you could take if you wanted to, that you can go check out the unpatterned fen that is on that site, which would be super neat if you wanted to see that.
The one that starts at 6 o'clock the same night?
No.
Here in Leeds? Oh, there's another one
No, it's
on
just,
the 24th that starts at 6 p.m. by Leeds. And they're gonna walk Curtis Road.
Oh, awesome.
oh, that's awesome, yeah.
I did not know that one was happening,
Yeah,
but
check out there.
definitely do it. It's
It's
never a
on
bad idea to
homepage.
get outside.
It's on Facebook. Somebody sent it to me. I don't get Facebook.
But yes, so next Thursday, the same time, we will be at Curtis Memorial Homestead. There's a big parking lot, so there should be enough parking. But again, Julie will be there, I will be there, Autumn will be there. I think Lily might try and make it. Chad is going to be there. So if nobody got invasive species books, he might still have some with him. And we can flip through them as we walk, which would be pretty fun. We'll do our best to ID some birds and talk about all of those land management concepts that we've talked about over the last 3 weeks. All of these Zoom sessions have been recorded. We are slowly but surely
working our way through getting them processed and up on our website and our YouTube page, as well as compiling all of the amazing handouts and resources that we've had. So Autumn and I are going to get together and make a giant, big zip file or PDF or something so that we can make sure that everybody has not only the paper copies that we were able to provide in person, but also some electronic copies for those of you on Zoom who are not able to get the paper copies. So again, anybody on Zoom, please drop in the chat if you would like any information from Lily or Nicole or Julie or any of our speakers, and we will do our best to get it to you. That is going to conclude today mostly. So we're going to end a little bit early, but I assume next week, weather provided, we will all be there happy with some boots and binoculars. I'm going to double check anybody on Zoom. Okay, Kelly. Kelly is going to be there too from IF&W. She's a great resource, wildlife biologist. She works with Joe. Checking the Zoom.
We tell you
Okay.
today we're gonna be there.
Yeah, that works too. And if your plans change and you can't be there, just also let me know. Just nice to know, and we'll make sure we get you any materials that we can.
You are planning to come when you get dressed, think about tips.
Yep. I have pulled 12 of them off of my dog after going for one walk, so not super fun. But yes, I want to thank you all again for joining us on Zoom and in person. Feel free to grab any extra snacks if you need them. We'll be here kind of cleaning up, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask. But those of you on Zoom, please drop in the chat Nicole's email, Nicole's material. Okay, I will make sure we get a copy of some of the material that Nicole had. We'll make sure we get it to you guys. But those of you on Zoom, I'm going to end the Zoom and we will make sure we get back to everybody unless there's any more questions.
Thank you very much.
Yes, of course, Andy.
Thanks.
All right.
Yeah, it was great.
Yes, thank you guys so much. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys back a little bit of time in your afternoon.
Yeah.